troops from Russia's Wagner mercenary group are leaving the city of Rostov, the country's major military post, and the group's leader, Yevgeny Prigozhin, will now move to neighbouring Belarus. Now, this is now less than 24 hours after attempting a rebellion. Yesterday, Prigozhin called for a rebellion against the Russian army and the country's defense ministry. This prompted an address by President Vladimir Putin, who described Prigozhin's actions as treason. But the situation de-escalated after an intervention by Belarusian leader Alexander Lukashenko. We now cross live to SABC News correspondent Alex Cadier, who joins us in Brussels, Belgium. Alex, thank you for your time this hour. So this is quite a fluid story that's moving at a fast pace. What are the latest there on the ground in relation to the Wagner Group?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. The big question now is, what now? What now for Yevgeny Prigozhin? What now for Vladimir Putin? It was called treason just yesterday, but now we know that Yevgeny Prigozhin will be allowed to seek exile in Belarus and that his troops will not be criminally charged. That is the kind of concession that you really don't see from the Kremlin, from Vladimir Putin. So what now? Now that his authority has been challenged, the other question, what now for Sergei Shoigu, the defense minister, and Valery Gerasimov, the head of the armed forces? These are the two military leaders that Prigozhin wanted to see demoted or at least sacked. Has a deal been struck, and where does that leave them, and what does that leave their fate? What now for the invasion of Ukraine from Russia? These Wagner troops have been told they will be signing contracts with the Russian Ministry of Defense, but clearly no love lost between those two organizations. Will they be able to fight together? Those seasoned Wagner troops are very important. So really more questions that we have answers at the moment. That's why the response from the European Commission, that building behind me here in Brussels, from NATO, also based in Brussels, is that the situation is being monitored very, very closely indeed. There are a lot of questions for the future of Vladimir Putin's authority, for the invasion of Ukraine, and for all those neighboring countries. But certainly a very, very dramatic end to an even more dramatic revolt by Prigozhin and the Wagner forces.
Let's zoom into the Wagner Group right now. This is a group that was started by a private citizen. Where is the leader right now?
Well, the last we heard, at least from Yevgeny Prigozhin, the last we heard from him was on a Telegram channel. Actually, just before speaking to you, I checked that Telegram channel to see if there were any updates. Well, actually, the last thing we heard was a voice note from him yesterday evening explaining that they were turning back to prevent Russian blood being shed. Absolutely radio silence. Since then, we've seen videos on affiliated Telegram channels to Yevgeny Prigozhin of him getting into an SUV, driving out of Rostov-on-Don, that Russian city that Wagner troops had taken under control, and presumably heading to Belarus. But that action, that single action of him traveling to Belarus, getting into that SUV and no longer being in charge of those Wagner mercenary forces in Russia and in Ukraine will have ramifications around the world. We know the Wagner Group was trying to spark up violence in Moldova. We know that the Wagner Group had very serious influence and collaboration with the government in the Central African Republic, for example. That will beg a lot of questions for the security stability of that region. Mali, a very similar picture, where the authorities there partnering with Russia, partnering with the Wagner Group to assure security and inside their territory. The situation in Syria will evolve as a result of the Wagner Group having lost its leadership, and ditto for Libya. This is the kind of situation that is incredibly fluid and brings me back to the question I had before, which is what now for all of these places? What now for the future of the invasion of Ukraine? But certainly very dramatic. But also the final question is what now for Vladimir Putin's narrative for his invasion of Ukraine. Yevgeny Prigozhin publicly on Telegram said that the idea that the Russians were in Ukraine to denazify the country was not true. He challenged the Kremlin's narrative publicly, and that may make things a lot more challenging for Putin and his regime in the weeks and months to come.
So, Alex, what has led him to suspending the rebellion?
Well, the deal is what we understand. That deal with the Kremlin, indirectly negotiated by President Alexander Lukashenko of Belarus. The deal, it appears, is that his troops would not be charged and that he would be able to move to Belarus without facing the kind of prosecution and the kind of punishment that Vladimir Putin was promising less than 24 hours ago. So certainly that will have been one of the motivations. There's, again, the fog of war here. It's very important to state a lot of the details of what we're hearing cannot be independently verified. We have three sources for most of these things: Yevgeny Prigozhin himself or the Wagner Group on social media platforms like Telegram. You've got the official Kremlin spokesperson Dmitry Peskov and the Belarusian government at the same time. Three sources that in the past have been a little bit flexible with some of the truths that they have shared with us and with the way that things have been presented there. So it's difficult to know exactly what that deal was, but certainly remarkable that Yevgeny Prigozhin led thousands of men to Moscow, threatening the territorial security integrity of Moscow, of the Russian capital, and is allowed to go free to Belarus. That is a remarkable change in the way Vladimir Putin has dealt with these things in the past. That will be a very significant ramification for this, but that deal struck really quite a remarkable evolution. Prigozhin, we assume, on his way to Belarus, and again, that question remains, what now?
So bringing this back to what has been happening between Russia and Ukraine, what impact will this have on the war in Ukraine?
That's an excellent question. That is a really important question. We know that these Wagner forces are some of the most seasoned, experienced, battle-hardened troops that the Russians have at their disposal in Ukraine. We know that the Ukrainians have been monitoring the situation extremely closely. The battle for Bakhmut that we've seen for the last few weeks, that really grinding attritional battle between Ukrainian forces and Wagner forces, has been a very central part of the Russian offensive. And we've seen those tensions growing between the Russian Ministry of Defense and its forces and the Wagner mercenary group. Yevgeny Prigozhin a few weeks ago saying that he was not receiving the kind of ammunition that he needed to sustain the attack on Bakhmut, and that if he didn't receive the kind of ammunition he needed, then him and his troops would pull out. So there's a question now. These are two groups that have had tension, that have not got on particularly well, have been fighting against the Ukrainians, have been pushing for that illegal war of aggression and invasion against Ukraine. But now there's just an assumption that these Wagner mercenary troops that have been pushing towards Moscow, that have been clearly displeased with the way that the Ministry of Defense in Moscow has been dealing with this, they now need to sign contracts with that very same Ministry of Defense. What will the trust be like between those troops? Will these Wagner mercenary troops be as effective and be as useful to the Russian effort? Those are all questions that will probably be answered in the next few weeks, but certainly could be a game changer if there is dissent within the Russian ranks, if there is lack of morale, if there is disorganization, a lack of clarity, a lack of strategy for them. That would be a very, very big opportunity for the Ukrainian forces. But as I say, at the moment, it is too early to tell exactly how this will impact, but it is certainly a very, very serious change to the status quo in Ukraine.
Listen, this is all a game changer indeed. Now, has there been any reaction from the EU as well as NATO?
Reaction from the EU and NATO has been very muted, has been very conservative. We are monitoring the situation very closely. That is all we've heard from officials from NATO, from the European Union, and even UK officials, government officials, saying that they are monitoring the situation very, very closely. No clear response, but there will have been conversations. We know that President Biden had a call with President Macron of France, Olaf Scholz of Germany, and Rishi Sunak of the United Kingdom. We also know that President Macron had a phone call with President Andrzej Duda of Poland. That was his first phone call. So European leaders are not publicly saying anything at the moment about this, but they are talking to each other. They are making sure that they are all on the same page and coordinating any response that may come forward. So a muted response, a cautious response from those Europeans. No question about their support of Ukraine. That will carry on, that will keep going, but certainly monitoring this very closely. Interestingly, we've also had some responses from Central Asian countries in particular, looking at Kazakhstan as one example of countries that would have otherwise perhaps, and this is speculation, expressed outrage or expressed revolt at Prigozhin's actions, at this rebellion by the Wagner forces. Instead, these countries that are close to Russia, relatively aligned to Russia, said this is an internal Russian matter, saying, not our problem, we're not getting involved. And that was an interesting reaction, because you could have expected a stronger push from them when actually, no, it's none of our business, it's an internal Russian issue. So European authorities here in Brussels, NATO a little bit further down the road, very clear, monitoring very closely, maybe more reaction to come in the next few days.
Right, Alex Cadier joining us there from Brussels, Belgium. Thank you very much for your time.